Okay, we were doing this the traffic studies, right? So yeah, this is what we did in the lecture before. Okay, last week basically, and there was one very long question in which you are required to calculate the continuous 15-minute counts, then calculate the peak hour volume, peak hour factor, and then calculate the flow rates as well. And in this section, I was able to calculate the flow rates. It was good. So today we will look at the speed studies. Okay, am I recording? Yes, I'm recording. We'll start with the speed studies. Now, speed studies, you can do it using a length of the highway and then measuring the distance of the car to cross that length. So the length which is used or the distance which is used for measuring the speed is known as a trap. Okay, a trap length. Okay, and then you use a simple stopwatch to measure the time of the vehicle to go over this trap, and you calculate the speed by doing distance upon time. Very simple, right? Obviously, this whole process is manual. You can also make direct measurements of speed using some handheld or fixed mounted radar. Okay, so if you have an instrument, there are speed guns and speed instruments available, which can be portable, like I said previously as well. They are like the temperature measuring the thermometers which they are using in the malls and other places for measuring your temperature. So similar to that, we have speed guns as well. So you can put it in your hand, point it towards the car when it is passing you, and you can press the button, it will give you the speed. Or you have fixed radars as well. So they are like theodolites or automatic levers. You place them on a tripod beside the road, and when the car passes it, you press the button, it will record the speed for you. Why we are calling this as manual? Because you are the one who will operate the device, and you are the one who has to write the speed as well. Okay, so that those devices which we are talking about here are operated manually. Okay, like the stopwatch, you are recording the time, right? You are starting the watch and stopping the time, right? So same thing with these handheld devices as well, or these speed radars as well. You have to press the button in order to collect the speed, and you have to write it down somewhere because the device will not store it for you. Okay, so this is why still it is manual. If you are using the stopwatch, there can be two types of errors in your observation: parallax or random error. Parallax is the error which is caused because of the position of the observer. Maybe if you are using a stopwatch, that means you have a trap length and you are trying to see when the car enters the trap length and leaves the trap length. Sometimes because of your position, okay, your line of sight is not looking straight at the road or not looking straight at the start and end points of the distance. I will show you later on with the example as well. So since your line of sight is not looking straight at the start or the end point, then it will cause an error in your observation of the vehicle. Okay, in order to precisely see where the vehicle, from where the vehicle is passing, your line of sight must be exactly in line with the point at which you are doing the observation. But obviously it may not be possible if you are doing it manually. Then this tilted line of sight will cause a parallax error. Okay, and you can shift the position of the observer, or you can calculate the error by doing some calculations, by taking some extra observation. I will show it to you in an example. Second error is the random error. Random error due to the operation of the stopwatch. Okay, so your hand can be sometimes very fast or too slow. So sometimes you may lose half a second or 1 second in pressing the stopwatch, or vice versa. Sometimes you do it sooner than you should. The car has not passed, but you were in anticipation or in excitement, you did it earlier. Okay, so obviously you cannot measure this type of an error, right? You cannot measure it. You cannot know exactly how many fractions of a second you lost because of that. or how much fraction of a second you did in advance because of that. That's why we call it random error, because random errors by nature cannot be calculated precisely. You must have studied about random errors in surveying as well, and it's the same thing, same theory here. You cannot calculate them precisely, but a good thing about random error is they are self-canceling. Okay, they are self-compromising. Okay, so sometimes you are too fast, sometimes you are too slow. So eventually they are cancelling out each other. So you took one value half a second earlier, the other value was half a second late. So eventually the average will be cancelling out each other. In the average, it will be cancelling out each other. Okay, so random errors cannot be determined exactly by doing any calculation, but the good thing is they cancel out each other. If you are doing it, your job properly, then random errors cancel out each other. Okay, now let us look at a study, at an example in which the first type of error is removed, the parallax error. So we have a speed study done with stopwatches. We had a trap length of 400 feet. So they were observing the time of the vehicle to cross 400 feet. The observer was lined up with the entry boundary line, meaning the entry point, the starting point of 400 feet. Entry boundary line means the starting point of 400 feet. And he was 60 feet away from the vehicles. 60 feet away from the vehicle means 60 feet away from the road. 60 feet away from the road. Why he was 60 feet away from the road? Because of two reasons. First of all, safety. If a vehicle goes out of control, you are too close to the side of the road, you are in danger. Okay. Secondly, accurate measurement. The second reason is accurate measurement. If you are very close to the road, then the drivers can see you, and they can become cautious that somebody is observing them. They do not know why you are recording them. They do not know why you are writing these things on a paper, or why you have a stopwatch in your hand. Then they will become cautious and they will not drive normally. They may drive too fast, or most of the times too slow. Okay, so in order to avoid that, we stay away from the road so that the drivers are not cautious of us and they are driving normally, because we need the speed in normal conditions. When this driver looks at the exit boundary, the exit point of the 400 feet, the end point of 400 feet, his line of sight is making an angle of 60 degrees from the perpendicular of the road. Let me show it to you here. So this is the observer. D1 is 60 feet. So I told you he's 60 feet away from the road. So this is the starting point and the end point is here, 400 feet. So D is 400 feet. So he's looking at the end point here. So you can see his line of sight will not be straight when he's looking at the end point. So this is the angle 60 degree. Okay, so there's a perpendicular from the road, and from this perpendicular, his line of sight is making an angle 60 degree when he looks at the exit point. Okay, so if this observer who is standing in this position, he records a time of 8.3 seconds in going from start to the end point. For a vehicle, this observer records a travel time of 8.3 seconds to go from start to end point. What will be the speed of this vehicle? What will be the speed of this vehicle? Now, for calculating the speed, what should I do? I have the distance, I have the time, right? I should do what?
Distance over time.
Distance over time. The life will be very easy, but we don't want to make your life easy, right? We want to make it as difficult as we can. So simply doing distance upon time is not enough, because you did not take care of the parallax error. So you can see what is happening here because of the parallax. This is your line of sight, the line of sight of the observer, and you can see in this line of sight, the vehicle and the exit point are in the same line. So this observer would feel that the vehicle has actually arrived at the exit point. But you can see in this figure, the vehicle is still behind the exit point, behind the end point. So the car did not actually cross distance D. Complete distance D was not crossed. 400 feet is not crossed yet. How much the car has crossed? Only D effective. The car has only crossed D effective. Okay. So I want to find out D effective. Then I should find out the speed using D effective, not D. Because D effective is the actual distance covered by the car. Okay, so in order to find out D effective, I have distance D1 and I have this angle delta. Now, which ratio should I use? Which trigonometric ratio should I use? I have D1, I want to find out D effective, and I have delta. Which trigonometric ratio should I use? Yes, sine or tangent. Huh? Which one? Should I use sine or cosine or tangent? What should I use here? I want to find out D effective. I have D1, which is 60 feet, distance of observer from the road, and I have angle delta.
Tan.
Sine.
Tan.
10, yeah, 10, yeah. So D1 will be your base and D effective will be your perpendicular, right? Angle is with the base. So D1 is 60 feet, right? I should have started the notebook earlier. It takes time. Anyways. Okay, so we did it yesterday. I just show you an example. Studies. Okay, so D effective will be 60 into 60, or tangent of 60. 60 feet is the distance of the observer from the road, and 60 degree is the angle delta. Okay, so you find out D effective. Let me make it bigger. So you find out D effective, okay, which is 103.9 feet. Time is 8.3 seconds, so speed will be distance upon time, but not the distance 400 feet, but this distance 103.9, which is the actual distance covered by the car. So the speed of the car is 12.52 feet per second. If you want, convert it to miles per hour, but this is not what we are doing in this question. Okay, conversion to miles per hour is not required. Anyways, two things we said earlier. You can minimize the parallax error by shifting the. So if the observer is standing in the middle, then this error may cancel out. Okay. One more thing which you can do is have two observers, one in line with the entry point, one in line with the exit point. So both these observers will be looking at the vehicle exactly in a straight line. So their lines of sight will not be tilted. So this observer will record when the car reached the entry point. This observer will record when the car reached the exit point, and then you find out the difference of their time, and you find out the speed using distance upon time, the actual distance. Okay. One more thing which you can do is shift the observer, shift D1. Okay, shift D1 so that D becomes equal to D effective. So you can play with D1 and delta to make D1 D equals to D effective. Okay, so you can play with these values. You can calculate in the office. So I want D to be 400 feet. I want D effective to be 400 feet as well. So which value of D1 and delta will give me D effective as 400? So we can play with the value and you can position the observer according to that. Okay, so these are few things which you can do in order to remove the parallax error, like remove it from the observation, not in terms of calculation, but from the observation itself. Okay. When you are doing the speed studies, okay, there are a few things you have to keep in mind. Now, whatever we are discussing right now is very important for you guys as well, because you will be doing the speed study for the second submission of the project. Okay, so keep these things in mind. Like I mentioned, one more thing which you can do, sorry, one more thing which I forgot here. One more thing which you can do to minimize parallax error is to keep D shorter. If you have distance D shorter, then the difference between D and D effective will automatically become less. Okay, so shorter D, a shorter distance, a shorter trap length, by default will have a smaller parallax error, and then it can be negligible as well. It can be negligible as well. No problem with that. Okay. And I mentioned that you must position yourself away from the road so that the drivers cannot see you. They should not become cautious, and they should be safe for you as well. Okay, so all these things should be kept in mind. When you're doing speed studies, avoid measuring the fastest or the slowest vehicle. Avoid measuring the fastest or the slowest vehicle, because fastest one and the slowest one are rare cases. These are extreme drivers, so we are not considering them. We are considering normal drivers. Okay, drivers who do not consider them Superman, who do not consider themselves Superman, or who do not consider that they are driving, I don't know, Batmobile or something. Okay, so they are driving normally. They are driving normally. Okay, and with the speed as the normal speed. Okay, and the slowest driver maybe he is slow because he has a problem with the car. So these drivers are not very common. They are random and they are extreme. We don't want to consider these values. This will ruin your data. So avoid taking the data of the fastest or slowest car. Fastest car to avoid is very easy. The guy is too fast for you, right? You cannot measure it. Slowest car, you know. Yeah? Everybody is honking at that guy. And so don't take those values. It will ruin your data. Secondly, if you are doing it after an intersection, so we discussed earlier that vehicles come out of the intersection in the form of a group, and that group is known as a platoon. Okay, so in the platoon, if you are closer to the intersection, the first guy in the platoon has the chance to accelerate to whatever speed he wants. The first guy in the lead in the lane has the chance to accelerate to speed he wants. The other guys are following him. And since in a platoon you have a group of vehicles in each lane, so in each lane the first drivers are basically the ones who are going at their own speed. The other guys are basically following him. Okay, so maybe it's a good idea to just focus on the first drivers each time a platoon is passing you. Obviously, if you stand long enough, you will have multiple platoons. Each time the signal becomes green, you have a new platoon. Okay, or if it's a roundabout, then you will have 3-4 vehicles coming together. Then after a few seconds, 3-4 vehicles coming together. So you will have multiple platoons, and each platoon you should consider the drivers who are at the front. Trucks and heavy vehicles should be avoided unless you are doing a study targeted to them. Heavy vehicles should not be part of the speed studies unless your target is to carry the studies or do the studies for heavy vehicles themselves. Okay, because heavy vehicles we know they are slower, so we focus on the normal vehicles which are more in the traffic stream, which are cars. Okay, as I said, keep these things in mind when you are doing the studies for your project as well. Then we come to semi-automated studies. Semi-automated studies are those studies in which the data is recorded by an equipment. Okay, and you will transfer the data or acquire the data from the equipment later on. Like you do in the field, you don't have to record anything manually, or you don't have to operate the instrument manually. But then why we call it semi-automated? We call them semi-automated because the equipment is portable. So you carry the equipment with you, you place it in the field, and then once the data collection is finished, you carry the equipment back with you to the office. Okay, so portable means something which you can carry easily in your hand, like your mobile phone, laptop, calculators. These things are portable. So traffic equipments are also, they are portable traffic equipments available as well. So you are not required to collect the data, but you are required to place the equipment for collection of the data. Once you place the equipment, you can go back to the office or to your home. Then you can come back once your study period is finished. Okay, so you are required to just carry the equipment before and after the study. The most commonly used portable equipment is a pneumatic road tube. I showed you last week as well, and I told you at that time there was one installed at the Rifa Avenue as well, and there was one installed in front of Ansar Gallery as well on the main highway. I'm not sure, but they are used very commonly in Bahrain. Okay, you will find them. I think if you travel enough, you will find one or two on any particular road of Bahrain. The main function of a pneumatic road tube is to count the number of axles. The main function of a pneumatic road tube is to count the number of axles. What is an axle? So for example, this is a vehicle. Let's say this is a car. Okay, so you have the two front tires, right? And between these two front tires, you have a rod. There's a rod which is connecting the two tires. This rod is known as an axle. This is an axle. Okay, so an axle is a combination of the tires on each side of the vehicle. Okay, so a car will have how many axles? Two axles. One at the front, one at the back. Okay, and as I increase the number of wheels in the vehicle, the number of axles will also increase. So trucks and buses will have more axles, right? So the pneumatic road tube basically counts the number of axles crossing it. The number of axles that cross over the tube, it is counted. So that is the main observation from the pneumatic road tube. You can convert the number of axles to number of vehicles if you know how many axles on average I have in a vehicle. On average. Okay, now if you say on average I have two, that means you are considering all vehicles are passenger cars, right? All vehicles are cars, because only cars have two axles. Okay, then that means you are saying that the heavy vehicles are not there, or the heavy vehicles are, you know, a very small proportion. You are neglecting them. Okay, so to know it exactly how many axles I have per vehicle, we do a short manual study on the location where you have put the road tube as well. Now you may say, why are we doing the manual study if it is done by the tube? The manual study is for a shorter duration. The road tube will give you a longer data, but in order to process the data, you need this manual study. So in this manual study, you will manually observe the number of vehicles and the number of axles of the vehicles which are passing from that segment from over the tube. Manually observe it, you will record it, and you will calculate the number of axles per vehicle using that manual count data, and then that will be used to convert the number of axles to number of vehicles from the pneumatic road tube data. You can also use the pneumatic road tube to calculate the speed data as well. How? If you know, again, there is some calculation and there is some observation required. You must know how much is the average difference or the average distance between two axles of a vehicle, and the pneumatic road tube is giving you the time at which the first axle crossed and the time at which the second axle crossed. Okay, so you know the time of the first axle, the second axle, you take the difference of the time, this will give you the time. And if you know the distance between the two axles, distance upon time will give the speed. So the time data of the first axle and the second axle is coming from the tube, and then you must know the distance between the first two axles of the vehicle for which you are trying to find out the speed. Okay, so using the pneumatic road tube, you can find out the volume and the speed, but for that you need some supporting data as well. Okay, let us look at the most common application of the road tube data, which is to find out the volume. So a 24-hour count was done using a road tube at a rural highway, and in this count we had 11,250 actuations. Actuations means the number of times the tube was crossed. So one actuation means one time the tube was recorded the data. Actuation means recording the data. So the tube recorded the data 11,250 times. So 11,250 times recorded what? Axles, right? This is what I told. Pneumatic road tube records number of axles. So it recorded 11,250 axles. To convert the axles or these actuations to number of vehicles, they did a short study as well on the same location, and they found these counts. Okay, so you have the number of axles in a vehicle, and you have the number of vehicles which are observed with these axles. So number of axles, minimum we have 2, maximum we have 6. Okay, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we have number of vehicles with that axles. So we have 157 vehicles which had 2 axles. We had 55 vehicles which had 3 axles. 50 vehicles which had 4 axles, and so on and so forth. Okay, so These are the number of vehicles which were observed with these many axes. Okay. Now, first of all, I need to calculate number of axes per vehicle, and then I will divide 11,250 with that to calculate the number of vehicles. Okay. Again, I will go back to the calculation which we have done already. Okay, so this is the table from the question. This is the study. Let me again make it clear. Okay, so first of all, number of axes per vehicle means number of axes divided by number of vehicles. Number of axes divided by number of vehicles will give you number of axes per vehicle. How many vehicles I observed? 321. What is 321? 157 plus 55 plus 50 plus 33 plus 8. You add all of them, you observed these many vehicles. Okay. How many axes you observed in these vehicles? How many axes you observed in these vehicles? Not the total of this column. Okay. It's not the total of this column. This column is how many axes I can have in a vehicle. So I can have 2, 3, 4. But how many axes did I observe in my study period? When I was doing the manual study, how many axes did I observe? So I observed 2 vehicles in 157 vehicles. So 2 into 157. Then I observed 3 axes in 55 vehicles. So 3 into 55. I observed 4 axes in 50 vehicles. So 4 into 50. I observed 5 axes in 33 vehicles. So 5 into 33. And I observed 6 axes in 8 vehicles, which is 6 into 8. Okay, so this comes out to be 892 axes. So in 321 vehicles, which I observed in a manual study, I observed 892 axes. Okay, so calculating number of axes per vehicle, 892 upon 321, so 2.77 axes per vehicle. Okay, now if you want to find out the number of vehicles in 24-hour counts, then number of actuations in 24 hours divided by number of axes per vehicle. So in 24 hours, you observed 11,250 number of axes, and each vehicle on average has 2.77 axes. So you divide them, you get 4,061 vehicles. So in 24 hours, 4,061 vehicles have crossed the pneumatic road tube. Okay. Now, if the number of heavy vehicles, the number of vehicles with 3 and 4 and 5 axles were less, then this number will be smaller as well. It will be closer to 2, right? So 2.77 means there were many heavy vehicles which had more than 2 axles, right? Okay, so if somebody assumed in that condition that I will take only 2 axles per vehicle, he would have been wrong by a large amount. Okay. Okay, any questions? Okay, now how can you use a pneumatic road tube in different manners? For example, if you want to find out the aggregate volume of the highway, the daily volume of the highway, which is for both directions. So you just want one value for both directions. Then in that case, you can use the road tube in this manner. So you have on one edge of the road the counter, and the tube is going from one edge of the road to the other edge of the road. So you have one road tube which is for both directions. So it will give you one value, and that one value will be for both directions. If you want different values for each direction, then you should use 2 road tubes, right? You can see it in the second figure here, the middle one. So this will give you for this direction, this one, the top one will give you for the other direction. Now, if you want the value for each lane, then it's a bit tricky. Tricky because of the position of the counter. So in this case, if I wanted value for this direction, I can put the counter on the other edge of the road. But for example, I want the value for this lane, no problem. The road tube will be put on this lane, and the counter will be on the side of the road. What about this lane, the middle lane? What will happen then? If I want the count for the middle lane, can I put the tube here? Then where would I put the counter? There's no place to put the counter here. Okay. So the road tube will still record the data for 2 lanes now. So it will record the data for the first 2 lanes on the right hand side, because I want to place a counter on the edge of the road. And if it's a 3-lane road, then the counter will be on the edge of the road, and the tube will cover all the 3 lanes. Now, if you want the count in the first lane, no problem. This row tube, let me call it row tube 1. This row tube will give you the count for the first lane, row tube 1. If you want the count for second lane, then you will take the count from row tube 2 and then you will subtract it from row tube 1 to get the count of the second lane. Okay. If you want the count for the third lane, then let me call it row tube 3, then you will take the difference of the count of the third row tube minus the count of the second one, right? Because the second one is the aggregate of 2 lanes, right? And the third one is the aggregate of 3 lanes. Okay. So 3 minus 2 will give you the count for the third lane. Okay. So when you are doing it for each lane, then it's a bit complicated because you cannot place row tube for each lane then. So you will have some row tubes which are covering all the lanes, and then you have to do some subtraction. Similarly, if you have 2 lanes, then you can only use 2 row tubes. If you have 4 lanes, then you can use 4 row tubes. Okay, and so on and so forth for each lane data. Okay, if you don't want for each lane, then obviously it's very simple. I showed you in the above pictures. Then we have automated studies. Automated are similar to semi-automated because we have detectors and equipments which are recording the data for us and saving the data for us. We don't have to operate the equipment, or we don't have to record the data manually. But then what is the difference between automated and semi-automated? The difference is the type of detector. So in semi-automated, we are using portable detectors. In automated, we are using permanent detectors. So permanent means what? You will place the counter on the road and in a way that you cannot remove it whenever you want. So for example, if the detector is below the surface of the road, okay, then obviously you cannot just dig the road whenever you want to get the counter, right? So the counter is permanently placed there. Similarly, you see traffic cameras. So you see they are installed on a pole. There's a pole and they are attached to the pole and so on and so forth. So they require a lot of work. They are not like tubes which you can just place on the road and then roll up and come back. No? So permanent detectors need more effort and more resources to be installed on the road. So they are not removed easily. Okay. So these detectors come with different types of applications, including volume, density, speed. There are so many things which you can get from these permanent detectors. These permanent detectors also have the ability to transmit the data in real time, especially to traffic signal systems. Okay, so we have, even in Bahrain, we have traffic signals which work on permanent detectors. These detectors are installed below the surface of the road. Okay, and wherever the wherever the traffic volume is higher, the detector will transmit the data to the traffic signal, and the signal timings will change according to that. Okay, and it makes sense, right? It makes sense. You are putting the detector to get the data, and the detector is permanent. So I cannot remove the detector to get the data in my office. So the detector itself should be should have the ability to transmit the data itself. Okay, otherwise it is useless. It is just recording the data for who? So the detector, the permanent detectors come with transmission systems by which you can record the data. Okay. Normally these transmission systems can be in the form of an IP address, like you have security cameras that can be accessed via IP addresses. These detectors, if they are not underground, if they are visible, then they also come with some ports as well. The ports in which you can connect your laptop or your other systems or tablet or whatever using a USB or using any other wiring or using any other LAN. Okay, so they have these ports available to them if they are visible on the road. If they are installed in a location where you can view them and you can access them. There's a handbook which is known as Traffic Detector Handbook. It contains much more discussion and description about the type of detectors and their technologies. If you're interested, it is available online. There are some detectors mentioned here, like we have sound detectors. So they work on the principle of acoustics. So they measure the sound which is created by the vehicle in its movement, and then they count the vehicle. Then we have opacity detectors, which are basically working on image processing. So they are like a camera. They are like a camera. So like you have face detection in your cameras, in your mobile cameras, you have face detection, right? So the traffic cameras also have this technology. So they are installed on the road, and when the vehicle passes from their frame, they can detect that it's a vehicle and they will count it. They can measure the speed and so on. So these opacity detectors can be just capturing the image of the road, or they can be capturing the infrared image of the road, or they may be capturing the video. Okay. So image means it's a one-time photo, right? Video means it would be a continuous stream of images. Then we have geomagnetic detectors, which work on magnetic sensors. So they are installed on the road, and they basically measure the deflection in the magnetic rays of the on the ground because of the movement of the vehicles. Then we have radars, which work on transmitted energy. So we have a transmitter and receiver. Transmitter at one end of the road, receiver at the other end of the road, and whenever a vehicle passes between them, the signals are intercepted and the vehicle is counted. And these radars can have infrared laser waves. They can have ultrasonic waves or microwave waves. Okay. Then we have electromagnetic induction, which are also known as inductive loop detectors. Okay, they are very common. The ones which we use on signals embedded are basically inductive loop detectors, and they are basically installed on the signals, like I said. So they are installed below the surface of the road. They are installed below the surface of the road. Okay, so there are two. So when vehicle passes from one to the other, they will record the time and then record the speed of the vehicles and so on. Then we have vibration detectors. So again, they are installed below the surface of the road, and they can be triboelectric, seismic, inertia switch detectors or sensors. And the vehicle causes some vibration on the surface of the road, and this vibration is recorded and the vehicle is counted. As I said, we are civil engineers. We are not mechanical electronics engineers who will know more about these detectors and sensors. Okay, so but if any of you is interested, they can read on their own. Okay, as a traffic engineer, we just want to see what type of technologies are available, and if you have if you have it available, then we can see how to use it. That's it. But alhamdulillah, we don't have it, so we don't have to worry about how to use them. Okay, but if any of you later on has a chance to have these detectors, working on these detectors, forward the video. I will show it to the students. Okay. One of the technologies which I discussed in the previous slide as well was VIP. VIP means what? Very important person, right? No. VIP means video image processing. Video image processing. So video image processing means you have cameras which are capturing the video, and the best place for them to be installed is on the mast arm of a signal. So mast arm of a signal is this one. This is the pole of the signal. So sometimes the signal is installed on this pole directly, and sometimes you have an arm which is extending towards the road, and the signal is installed on this arm. Okay, so this is the best location for putting a video camera to capture the traffic, because this is looking at the camera at the traffic from the front, and it is on the top as well. So you're looking at traffic from top front, so it has minimum obstruction for the traffic, so the video will be clear. If you are putting on the side, then obviously there can be obstruction on the side of the road, or some vehicle in one lane can block the vehicle to the other lane. So if you don't find such arrangement on the field there where you can put it on the mast arm of a signal, then look for some other place which is overhead. Okay, so we basically prefer the top view over the side view. Okay, we want the top view, not the side view. You can play with the focus of the camera. regards to how many lanes you want to capture. So I want to just collect the data from one lane. I can zoom in on one lane. Okay. This type of technology has three components: a camera, which is capturing the image; a microprocessor with the camera, which is storing and interpreting the image. Okay, because we are not concerned about the road itself, right? We are concerned about how many vehicles are passing from the road. So the microprocessor, like I said, like the face detection, it will detect the presence of the vehicle in the video and will count it. Okay, and then later on you need a software that can work with the microprocessor to convert the image data into traffic data. Okay. The vehicle appears in the video as a compressed package of pixels. Yeah? Video or image is made up of pixels. So if the pixels are in a particular order, then the camera or the microprocessor should detect it as a image. Okay. In order to do that, in order to make the processor, or in order to give the ability to the processor to identify the vehicles, you have to do some calibration yourself. Okay, and this calibration procedure is not usually very difficult. Like when you install a software in your laptop, when you install a software in your mobile, when you start it for the first time, it will ask you for the option, right? You want to enable this option, you want to disable this option. Same goes with these traffic cameras as well. Once you install them, you start them, it will ask you for these calibration steps. Okay, so normally calibration is done. For example, you start the camera. So from the image, from the camera, you will have an image that the road, this is the road which is captured by the camera. Okay, and then from this image, so for example, this is the image which is shown by the camera, for example. Then from this image, select the space of the image which is occupied by a vehicle. So I will select this one, this is a vehicle. I will select this one, this is a vehicle. I will select this one, this is a vehicle. So whatever image is, whatever space is occupied by the vehicle, I will select that space and notify the camera that it's a vehicle. So whenever a similar image comes in the video, the camera or the processor by default will capture it or will note it down as a vehicle. So this is basically calibration. It's very simple. It's like selecting and clicking. That's it. Okay. Like I said, if I get a chance to have a real video of this, I will share it with you. Okay. And you should do it in different conditions. Do the calibration in different conditions so that you have the camera can capture, or the camera is calibrated for different light conditions and weather conditions. Okay, so maybe it's capturing the image very well in the daytime, but it's not doing so good in the nighttime as well, because you did not do the calibration at nighttime. So do the calibration as much as possible so that results are accurate in different conditions. Okay, so the software which are available, which convert the image into traffic count, they can find out the length of the vehicle, the number of vehicles in each lane, and they can find out the speed of the vehicle as well, because obviously the vehicle is moving in the video, right? Video image processing has been started to use has started to be used at some signals as well. So some signals have cameras on their arm mast, and these cameras are recording the traffic and they are transmitting it to the signal as well, and the signal is timings are being changed according to the traffic data which is coming. Now this technology is growing faster than any other traffic data collection technology. Why? Because we have so much data, it is simple, it is convenient. Okay, so if you go online, search for image processing, you will find many research papers on image processing. Okay, even like every parking lot, every major parking lot has a camera, every mall has a camera, every government facility has a camera. So they have so many cameras available, there is so much data already available. Okay, so this is why this image processing technology is growing very fast, because the data is already available. So people are now investing, how can we use this data for traffic data collection and for traffic management. So it is expected that in future you know, even in your vehicles, some of you may be using the camera for back parking, right? When you are parking reverse parking, some of you have these cameras in your vehicle. Some of you have more advanced vehicles which have cameras at the side as well. Okay, so they can detect if your vehicle is going out of lane or some vehicle is coming very near to you or so on and so forth. These are all images or the data of the images. So we can have an image processing software, you know, within this, or if you can provide this data to an image processing software that can easily be converted to traffic data, traffic counts. Okay, so this technology is considered to be fast growing and it is expected to take over the traffic data collection and monitoring business. Like I said, I'm not going to the extra time. Okay, so I will not cover many slides here, and this is just theory, so I will try to do it fast. If you want to leave, as I said, you can. Okay, just leave a message before leaving. Just leave a message. Okay, so now we are coming to chapter 11. Chapter 11 is about spot speed studies and travel time studies. Travel time studies, I will cover it in some other slides. Okay, so this is about only spot speed studies. Spot speed means speed which is measured over a point or a spot. Okay, so if you have a speed gun or a speed camera or speed radar, then measuring the speed over a point is not a problem. So spot speed studies by default should be done with a speed measuring equipment. But if you don't have the speed measuring equipment, you want to do it with a stopwatch, then you should select a very short segment, and then the speed measured on that segment can be considered as spot speed. How short should be the segment? It should be less than 1000 feet. Should be less than 1000 feet. What is the purpose of doing spot speed studies? We want to find out the choice of the drivers related to their speed. At what speed the driver wants to go. This is the aim of doing a spot speed study. At what speed the driver wants to go. Okay, so this is only possible in free flow conditions. When you have free flow conditions, free flow meaning the density is almost zero. Okay, so that your speed is not affected by traffic. Your speed is not affected by traffic in free flow conditions. So spot speed studies must be done in free flow conditions. Now by nature or theoretically, ideally free flow means zero density. Free flow means zero density. But zero density means no vehicles. So if there are no vehicles, how can you measure the speed? How can you measure the speed if there are no vehicles? So we have put a range here up to which free flow speed can be measured or spot speed can be measured. And that range is up to 1000 vehicles per hour per lane for freeways and 500 vehicles per hour per lane for other uninterrupted flow facilities. Freeways are high standard roads, very high speeds, more lanes, wide roads, median, shoulder, everything is there. So they have very high design standards. For them, up to 1000 vehicles per hour per lane is still free flow for them, only for them. Okay, these are uninterrupted flow facilities, but very high standards, pure uninterrupted flow facilities. For other uninterrupted flow facilities, up to 500 is enough. So up to 500 is enough for every facility. Up to 500 is a free flow condition for any facility, up to 500. Okay, if it is a freeway, then you can go up to 1000 as well. Okay, so there are two conditions for measuring the spot speed. First of all, short segment, ideally a point. Second, free flow condition, meaning less than 500 vehicles per hour per lane volume on the road. Okay. Now we do the spot speed studies to find out the choice of drivers about their speed. Why do we need to find out the choice of drivers? We need the choice of drivers for these applications. Okay, for establishing the effectiveness of new or existing speed limits or enforcement practices. So at what speed the driver wants to go, the speed limit should be according to that. And if the driver wants is risky, then you should change your enforcement practice to make the driver follow your speed limit. So for example, you put a speed limit sign there, which is telling the driver to go at 100. Drivers are not following it, and there are many accidents at that location. So maybe with the speed limit sign, I need to do something else as well. Maybe I need to put a speed hump. Maybe I need to put a speed camera there. Okay. So these things will come when you know at what speed the drivers are driving at. Okay, when they are in free flow. Design applications such as calculation of sight distances also depend upon spot speed data. So the speed which you are using for calculating sight distances in the previous chapters were dependent upon spot speed. That speed was spot speed. Okay. And you know sight distance is used for calculating radius of the curve. Sight distance is used for calculating length of the curve. And there were many things which we have done earlier related to sight distances. Speed was also used for calculating the gradient, the length of the gradient, the value of the gradient. Not calculating, selecting. So there were tables which I showed you in lecture 2. And if you want to use those tables, then you must know the speed. That was the main parameter for finding out the gradient and the length of the gradient. Okay. Design of traffic control devices such as signals also depend upon spot speed. Okay, because this is the choice of driver, the worst scenario. The choice of driver is the highest speed, right? So we are designing for the highest value, which is the worst scenario. In the first lecture, the slides of the first lecture, we have already covered calculation of yellow interval using sight distance. So I told you yellow sight distance depends upon spot speed. So there you have the relationship. Placing the signs on the road, that also depends upon speed, because according to speed, the placement and the size of the sign should change. The size of the sign should change according to the speed of the road or the speed of the driver. Development of signal progressions also requires spot speed data. Signal progression means what? Movement of vehicles from a series of signals without stopping. Signal progression is when vehicles move from a series of signals without stopping. So you go from one signal to the other one, to the next one, and it is already open for you. So you move in a progression. So obviously in designing the progression, you must know at what speed the driver is coming from the previous intersection. Okay, so that speed is also spot speed. Investigation of high accident locations also requires spot speed data collection, because I think I mentioned it earlier as well in the last chapter that at high speeds the accidents are more severe. So if you are investigating a location where there were severe accidents, then spot speed would be can be your cause of accident or can be the cause of severity. Okay, and I also told you that at high speeds the reaction times become more critical, because even with a difference of 1 second you are covering so much distance. Okay, so most of the times when you are investigating a high accident location, speed of the drivers is a contributing factor, is one of the causes of accidents, or if not, it can be used as a measure for avoiding the accident. So if you reduce the speed, the driver has more chances of avoiding the accident. Okay, so that's why investigation of high accident location also includes collecting spot speed data. There are few terms related to spot speed which will be of interest to us, and we will use them later on. The first one is the average of spot speed, which we call as time in speed. So in the previous chapters, and in lecture number 3, we discussed two types of mean speed: space mean and time mean. From then onwards, we have been discussing the space mean speed. So where is the application of time mean speed? This is the application of time mean speed. The mean of spot speed is the time mean speed. Okay, and I've already shown you in the previous slides where do we use the spot speed data. Okay, so the average speed of all vehicles passing the study location during the period of study is time in speed or the spot speed. Then we have standard deviation. Standard deviation simply means the average difference between the mean speed and the other values of the speed. So you calculate the mean speed and the difference between the mean and the other values, you take their average, that should be the standard deviation. Okay, the average difference or the average deviation between the mean value and the other values. This is just a simple definition. When we will come to the calculation, you will see the calculations are more complicated. But the simple definition is the average deviation or the average difference between the mean and the other values. Then we have 85th percentile speed. Percentile means the highest value for a proportion of data. The highest value for a proportion of data. So 85th percentile means highest value for 85% drivers, highest speed for 85% drivers. So if I tell you 85th percentile speed for a set of drivers is 70 kilometers per hour, that means 85% drivers were driving at 70 kilometers per hour or less. 85% drivers were driving at 70 kilometers per hour or less. That is the concept of percentile. Okay, so some of them were driving at 60, some of them were 65, but overall 85% were driving at this value or less than this value. Then we have median. Median means the middle value. Median means the middle value. Okay, so any value above which you have half of the data, below which you have half of the data, this is the median. Why do we need median if we have the mean? We use a median because median does not get disturbed, does not get disturbed by the extreme values of the data. So for example, if I have three values, 30, 40, 50, 30, 40, 50, take the median, it will be 40, one value below, one value above. Okay, now if the lower value 30, if I change it to 20, the median will still remain 40, one value above, one value below. Okay, if I increase the higher value to 100, will it change the median? No. One value below, one value above, the median is still 40. So in many cases, median is more useful than mean because it does not get disturbed by the highest or the lowest value of the data. Okay. Then we have pace. Pace is not a value, it's a range. Pace is a range, and the difference in the values of the range is 10 miles per hour. The difference in the values of pace range is 10 miles per hour. So if the lower value of the range is 50, the upper value will be 60. If the lower value is 51, the upper value will be 61. Lower value is 52, the upper value will be 62. Okay, so it's a 10 mile per hour range, and in that range you have the highest proportion of drivers as compared to any other range of the same size. Pace is that 10 mile per hour range in which you have the highest proportion of drivers compared to any other range of 10 miles per hour. So for example, if I tell you the pace range is 50 to 60 kilometers per hour, let's say the pace range is not kilometers per hour, miles per hour, 50 to 60 miles per hour. If the pace range is 50 to 60 miles per hour, and I'm telling you 60% of drivers are driving in this range, 60% of the drivers are driving in this range, and this is my pace value. So this means what? There is no other 10 mile per hour range in this data in which you can find more than 60% drivers. If I tell you this is my pace range and in this range I have 60% drivers, that means there is no other range of 10 miles per hour in this data where you can have more than 60% drivers. Okay, these are just examples. Okay, the numbers are just for examples. Obviously, we will come to the calculation inshallah on Thursday when we will look at the examples. Okay, I'm just trying to explain what do we have here. Speed data can be collected using permanent detectors, and loop detectors are the most common form of collecting speed data. Whenever you are not using permanent detectors, then you can use handheld or vehicle mounted radar guns or detectors, like I've already told you in the previous chapter. You calculate or you take individual speeds and then you represent them in the form of frequencies of speed groups. So you take your data and then you divide your data into different speed groups. Okay, and then for each speed group you will find out the frequency of the speed in that group. So basically you are trying to find out how many speeds were observed in a range of x to y. After you collect the data, you will represent the data in a form where it is showing how many speeds were observed between this range. And this range is basically the speed group, what we are calling as the speed group. And this format is easier for calculation. Let me show you an example here. So you can see this is the speed group here. The first two columns are the speed group. So the speed group is 30 to 32, then 32 to 34, 34 to 36, 36 to 38. This is a speed group. And for each group, you have the frequency here, the number of values in that group. So how many vehicles were driving between 30 to 34? 5. How many vehicles were driving between 38 and 40? 13. Okay. So my data was from 30 to 68 miles per hour. These are the ranges. This is the range of my full data. and then I divided this data into smaller groups, smaller speed groups, and then whatever data I recorded from the field, I classified that data into these groups. I divided that data into these groups. Okay. Now the speed group, the optimum range of the speed group is 2 miles per hour. Between the upper and the lower limit, the optimum difference is 2 miles per hour. Okay, but if you have more data, you can go for a lower value in of the range as well. Okay, so for example, you can see here in this example, they are using 2 miles per hour difference of the speed group. Okay, so each speed group has a range of 2 miles per hour, right? But if you have more data, you can reduce this. So from 30 to 31 is also possible. But the maximum difference is 5 miles per hour. The maximum possible difference for the speed group is 5 miles per hour. So if your lower limit is 30, the upper cannot be more than 35. Okay, and the speed group should be of the same size for the whole data. Okay, so if the first one is 30 to 32, the second one can only be 32 to 34. Okay, so you have to keep the same size for all the speed groups in the data. Okay, when you take the data using a speed gun or something, okay, when you take the data using a speed gun, then you can use telemarks, this type of a sheet, to record the data. Okay, so you can see the speed groups are here. Okay, so obviously you must know the speed if you want to record the data in this manner. You must know the speed of the vehicle, otherwise you don't know where if you are using the stopwatch, you just know the time, right? You don't know the speed. So you must have the values of the speed directly from the field if you want to collect the data in this manner. Now in this manner you can see they are using lines. So each line represents one vehicle. Each line represents one vehicle, and then you can see cross lines as well. So you can see vertical lines and cross lines. So each cross means set of 5 lines. Each cross means a set of 5 lines. So this is, you can see 5. Okay, one cross means 5 vehicles. So between 30 to 34, they observe 5 vehicles. So they put 4 lines. When the 5th vehicle came, they crossed them. So 5. In this case again 5. One cross means 5. In this case you can see one cross and then 2 extra lines. So 5 plus 2, 7. In this case you can see 2 crosses. So 5 plus 5, 10, plus 3 extra lines. So 13. Okay. Why do I using this notation? Because it is easier to put lines instead of writing numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So these lines are known as telemarks. And like I said, the notation is, or the approach is, you put 4 lines, and when you see the 5th one, you cross the 4, and then you start again. Okay, so each cross will represent a combination of 5 lines, 5 vehicles. Okay, so this is where I'm stopping now, and we will do the remaining the example on Thursday, inshallah. For the test, for the quiz, the new guidelines are used. Many of you have complained regarding the responders, so I will not use the responders. Okay, so I'm trying to be helpful to you. Okay, now you have to cooperate with me as well. Okay, I will monitor you through Teams. I will monitor you through Teams. Okay, 2 parts of the exam: numerical, start 12. You have 15 minutes to do it. Starting at 12, you have maximum 15 minutes. You don't need 15 minutes to answer 5 MCQs and 5 true and false. Please. Okay, 15 minutes is just the maximum time if somebody wants to waste his time or her time in doing MCQs and true and false. These are only 30% marks. Keep in mind. These are only 30% marks. Okay. So at 12:15, after 12:15, whoever is attempting the first part, I will force complete to it. I'll force him to complete it. Force him or her to complete it through the system. I will not ask you. I'll go in the system. I'll stop the first part for you. And I'm doing you a favor. I'm doing you a favor. I know what most of you have done in the highway course last year. Okay. You were wasting time. You wasted, like, some of you wasted 1 hour. Some of you wasted more than 1 hour in answering 10 MCQs and 10 true and false. And then you could not do the numerical part, in which each numerical was 15-20 marks. Okay, so I'm doing you a favor. Anybody who is doing the theory part after 12:15. I will go to the system and I will stop the quiz for him. I will stop the theory part for him. Okay, then he has to go to the numerical. Okay, so if you finish the theory, the MCQs and true and false, I'm sure everybody can finish that part in 5 minutes. Okay, so the numerical part will be available from 12:05. From 12:05. Okay, you will finish till 1 p.m. Okay, you can submit through Teams. You can submit on Blackboard. I will prefer Blackboard. I will prefer Blackboard. Okay, no WhatsApp. Some of you may already know that I'm not answering your questions even on WhatsApp because I don't want to communicate with you on WhatsApp. You have Blackboard, you have Teams. If both options are not working for you, then how are you attending the classes? Okay. The reason why I was going for Respondus and the reason why I did not use Respondus in the last air highway course, because when I'm using Teams, I have to sit in front of the screen and then I have to shout at each and every one of you to open the camera, adjust the camera, your face is not coming, and so on and so forth. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Okay. I will record. Okay. I will record, so whoever is on the camera, they will be recorded. If you are not on the camera, I will not accept your exam. That's it. Don't argue with me. I was doing this. I was doing this. You are not on the camera. Your exam is submitted. I will cancel it. Okay. I will not shout. I will not go after each and every one of you. If your video is not on, you can see it. I can see my video is on. I can see what I'm showing you. Okay. This is not the first day of your using Teams. Okay. So everybody knows how to check Teams. Everybody knows how to use Teams and how to put their video on. Okay. If your video is not on and your exam is submitted, I will cancel it. Okay. So I'm trying to be fair with you. I'm trying to facilitate you as much as possible, but don't make the things difficult for me. Okay. So numerical part 12:05, it will be open from 12:05 till 1 p.m. You have the chance. Upload it on Blackboard. Okay. The formula sheet will be attached with the questions. So you have a file. You download the file. You will see the values, the questions, and the formula sheet. And you can use Word. You can use PDF, or you can use JPG, the picture and JPEG. Okay. Don't upload anything. Some of you take the pictures from mobile phone or tablet or something, and then I cannot open it. Again, the same thing. If you make it difficult for me, I will not entertain you. Okay, I'll just put 0 for that question and move on. Last year it happened to 2 students. Okay, I will not give you another chance. You are uploading the file, you should know which format you are uploading. Okay, I've tried to make the questions easier for you so you have time to do this uploading as well. Okay, and the questions should not take more than half an hour. So 15 minutes, if you consume the full time of numerical, 15 minutes for that, then half an hour is more than enough for the numericals. So actually you have 15 minutes just for uploading. 15 minutes just for uploading. If you cannot do it even in that, and you cannot check your files before uploading, then nobody can help you. Then obviously you deserve a D or an F or something like that. Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, so let me. Some people already left. Okay, Ali Muhammad. Oh, let me finish with you guys. Okay, so Hissa Ahmad, Ali Khalil, Hissa and Ali both are here. Qusay Ahmad. Okay, Yusuf Nidam. Okay, he left a message. Hara Nasir. Okay, she is here. Ali Muhammad. Okay, he left a message. Sadiq Abdul Hussain. Sadiq Abdul Hussain. Okay, he left a message. Bayan Yusuf. Okay. Balkis Hamad. Okay. Hala Munir. Alright, left a message. Okay, Omar Walid. Okay, Umar Walid, not here. Okay, Abdurrahman Muhammad, Sara Ali. Abdurrahman Muhammad, Sara Ali, okay, both are here. Batul S. Majid. Batul S. Majid. Muntadir Hussain. Okay, Saleh is here, okay. Ahmad Muhammad Mahdi. Ahmad is here, okay, fine. Okay, now I'm going for section 1. So people from section 1. Hala, okay. Susan, okay, fine. Hala, Sadiq is here, right? Sadiq is here, Susan is here, Huda. Okay, who else? Okay, done, right? Done. Yeah. Okay, thank you. All the best for the exam tomorrow, and I will take the lecture on Thursday, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.